thank you for having us. Again, I'm Angie, and this is one of my favorite movies, so I was so glad to be able to come and talk about it. Among other things, this movie is about really unfortunate decision-making, whether it's intentional or innocent. Ends up in some really dire consequences. And so in this one, it's ethical consequences, societal consequences, and ecological ones. So the Han River is a pretty big river in Seoul, and I got to see it. Some of my family lives there, so it's quite impressive. But here at home, we have also a very impressive river, the Delaware River, and it's pretty important. It's a really huge economic resource for the region. It is a really important habitat, and of course recreation. We all like to walk along the river and do other things, bike and hike and so forth. So it's pretty important to us. And as a river goes, it is the largest undammed river east of the Mississippi, probably a little over 330 miles from the headwaters in New York all the way down to the Delaware Bay in between New Jersey and Delaware. So it's a very large watershed, and it's really super important for us in particular because it is our drinking water. Some of you, if you live in this region, you're drinking the Delaware River. And it supports about 15 million people. New York gets Delaware River water for their drinking water. Well, they get it from other places as well, but there's such a huge population up there that they're drawing. And so 15 million people is a lot of people. If you do the calculation, it's about 5% of the entire country drinking Delaware River water. So keeping it really clean and healthy is something that we should all strive to do, not just for that aspect, the health aspect, but also because it's a great natural resource for us. So one of the important things to consider in keeping water clean is that sometimes we don't know, right? We don't really know by looking at water what's going on underneath. There are tons of contaminants that get into the water, and they range everything from industrial waste and heavy metals to pesticides and dog waste and really poor sewer infrastructure to other kinds of contaminants that we really can't see. But there are definitely ways that we can know whether a river or a waterway is healthy, and I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who's going to talk a little bit about how we can tell that we have decent quality water.
All right. Hello, test it. There it is. All right. Hi, guys. How are you? So I'm Amy, and we have some live animals. The ones that we are going to talk about right now are our friends like this guy. I'm going to probably walk him around a little bit. I don't know. I just hate standing still. And he's so tiny. So this is our friend Oscar. He is a white tree frog, and the reason why we brought him today is because frogs act as an indicator species. So what that means is that as pollution and things are coming down into the water, unfortunately, the frogs are the first ones to be affected. So as scientists are studying the animals and the populations, if frogs are declining, that is a sign that there's pollutions in the water. So I'm going to walk them around, and Sharon's going to tell you tons more because I am not very good at talking today, but he's so cute. So we're going to walk around. He's so cute.
To absorb everything through their skin. So anytime there's pollution, they're the first ones to go. So we actually participate in a program called Frog Watch, which is a citizen science program that you could do in your own backyard, where you can go out, listen to frogs, and report them back to the scientists at Frog Watch. And that helps scientists figure out where the healthy frog populations are and where the frog populations are declining. So that helps them figure out what waterways are having issues. So I say amphibians, but then we also have our friend Tater Tot, who you may not be able to see from your vantage point. But at the end, we are going to let you guys come on down and get a closer look at all the animals that we brought with us today. So tater tot is a cane toad. They're also called marine toads. And this is an example of an invasive species. So they do not belong where they are currently found. They're a huge invasive species, particularly in Australia. And the reason that they're a problem is because they eat everything, including the native frog populations and native toad populations that live there. So in Australia, they actually have cane toad hunts, and you can get like $5 for every cane toad that you bring in, and try to help reduce those invasive species. One of the problems with these guys is they have toxins in their skin, so there's nothing out there that eats them. You want? Well, yeah. Well, get the other animal.
Okay.
Okay.
So, when it comes to invasive species, especially the ones here in the United States, it's important to talk about our friends down in Florida. Now, I usually, when I'm doing assemblies for elementary school kids, I usually say, all right, this is the animal that makes grown-up ladies scream, so hold yourselves together. Here we go.
Grown-up ladies don't scream.
Grown-up ladies don't scream. I make the kids do funny stuff. I'm not going to make you grown-ups do it today. I say grown-ups. I obviously talk to elementary school kids about something. Like, somebody in the back is like, yay! All right. So this is our friend Monty, and like I mentioned, I said it's important to talk about when we talk about invasive species. It's important to mention animals like pythons, especially the Burmese pythons down in Florida. So they're having a huge problem down in Florida right now where people get Burmese pythons as pets. They seem really nice. This guy, by the way, is Monty Ball Python. All right, I forgot to mention that. So he's a ball python, but he represents his friends, the Burmese pythons. Burmese pythons, if you're unaware, get huge. And people tend to think that if they keep animals in small enclosures, that they'll stay small. That's not the case. So then they have this Burmese python, and it's huge, and they don't want it anymore, and unfortunately, people let them go. Now, down in Florida, they can thrive. If you let a python go up here in New Jersey, it won't make it through the winter. But in Florida, they're thriving, and it's actually becoming a huge problem down there in Florida. They have hunts for them as well. Mm-hmm. They have, all kinds of things to try to rid the area of the pythons. Because if you're familiar with Burmese pythons, they could eat like a baby deer. They're pretty big. It's pretty scary.
And another problem with it being an invasive species is they tend to outcompete the native stuff that's supposed to be living there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the
Should
grand finale animal?
Should I just pass you him?
No,
You
I'll
got
take
it.
this one.
You ready? I'll just continue to hold this snake.
All right. Hey.
So this is Fluffy to
Woo! So, yes, this is Fluffy. Fluffy came to us because she is a confiscated pet, hence the name Fluffy. She actually came to us because she was part of a dogfighting ring. The people with the dogfighting ring had her as a status symbol, and in New Jersey, it's illegal to have alligators as pets. Alligators, she is an American alligator. Alligators grow about a foot a year. So, she's kind of small and cute right now, but in 10 years, she will be 10 feet long. When she's fully grown, she could be anywhere between 13 and 15 feet long. So I usually ask my students, what would you do with a 15-foot-long alligator? It could not live in your bathtub. It could not live in your swimming pool. And they don't particularly like me at the moment. They don't particularly like a New Jersey winter, so they don't do well. And she's a baby alligator and is not used to the bright lights, so we'll give her a second, right? There you go.
She's also feisty, and that's why we think she's a girl. To be honest, we're not sure if she's male or female, but she has such an attitude that we assume that it's a female.
Yes, every alligator I've had that was a boy has been real calm and mellow, and the girls tend to have little attitude problems.
And she definitely has fun. Question.
If we put her down, she'd be pretty fast. What are they, like 15, 20 miles an hour?
You're far enough away that you'll be fine. You're good. I'm the one that would have the problem.
Right. And I handle her all the time, so I'm used to her little outbursts.
Does anyone else have questions? We can open it up. I love questions. It could be just a random animal question or.
How big would that snake get?
So ball pythons don't get huge. He is fully grown in length they will get wider as they go, but about 4 feet, 4.5 feet. It's hard to, you can see he doesn't really want to stretch all the way out. I'm trying to show you.
He's about 25 years old, so he is a pretty old ball python.
Ball pythons, yeah. The record for oldest lived ball python was 37 years old. I think there was one that just outlived it. They both are from the Philadelphia Zoo. Lucille ball python was the oldest one that was, I think she was, past that. But yeah, they live quite some time, which is pretty cool.
Quite a commitment for a pet.
Yeah. The easiest way to tell is actually through the blood test.
Or the vet has to do a probe. They don't particularly like that, and they have to be a certain size before the vet is comfortable with doing that. So she hasn't been probed yet.
Oh,
yes, I'm sorry. I know. You don't want to be probed. I get it. Yeah, most reptiles aren't what we call dimorphic, which means that the female looks really different from the male. So it is difficult to tell until they get much older, and then sometimes the coloration might be the clue. I know.
yeah.
So it's pretty good if we're drinking it. I would say that many decades ago it was very poor, so much so that it's that situation where you could pretty much light the river on fire, and the sewage and the industrial waste was just kind of pouring in without any checks and balances. And then with the onset of the Clean Water Act in I think it was the 40s, late 40s, really started the process. Actually, just prior to that, there were some rules that happened around here, but just prior to that, they started to manage the resource so that by the time it got around to the 70s or 80s, it was pretty quality. There still weren't a lot of native fishes that would swim up the river to spawn, the ones that come out from sea in. But more and more, those fish like shad and sturgeon and those kinds of things, American eel, are coming back into the river now in record quantities. Actually, this year, the young shad, there have been so many that people have caught, and they're one of those indicator species that tells you that the water is of quality, that they'll actually come back and spawn. So I would say it's pretty good. Now, there are probably some areas you shouldn't swim in because there might be agricultural runoff or something like that, but it's definitely great for drinking after it goes through the process, and boating, and those kinds of activities. So we encourage you to get out and do that. And so water is a fundamental thing. It's the thing that every living creature has in common. So we feel like it's our message is to get that out there to be a steward of our waterways, especially the Delaware, since we rely on it so much. Any other questions?
The invasive creatures, are they predominantly all from people dumping animals that they don't want, or reptiles or whatever, or are some from like hazardous waste or anything like the movie, or any other reason?
Well, definitely with the invasives, the majority of them would be from the pet trade. Red-eared sliders are turtles that you find in rivers and streams all over. They're actually invasive. They're not from this area. So that's a pet trade animal. And then other things, the big name invasive species may have come on ships. Cargo ships are bringing things over, and they bring animals with them. There's an invasive snake on the island of Guam, the brown tree snake that decimated the bird population on the island of Guam. They came over on battleships in World War II. So, things come in all different ways.
The cane toads are actually human introduced on purpose. So they brought the cane toads over to eat beetles, and they just didn't have any natural predators like they did in their home, and like native dogs would lick them and get sick, and so they were human introduced. And the Burmese pythons, they think, happened because they had some that were in a warehouse, and there was a storm, and the storm blew up the warehouse, and the snakes all escaped.
And actually, here in the Delaware, here in the Delaware and up the Schuylkill, the the snakehead, the Asian snakehead, came from the Midwest and that is now in our waters. And it's one of those species that really thrives in habitats where other things don't thrive and just eats its way through and outcompetes everything else.
There's a couple other hands. You had your head up in the back. Okay.
I was going to ask if you use the Schuylkill water, do we drink that at all?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. My guess is that it is a tributary of the Delaware, so some of that is as part of the drinking water, but there are probably areas of the Schuylkill that are still in need of some help.
In reference to that, so like you go into Philadelphia and the water tastes different. You go to Jersey, it has a different taste. If it's all coming from Delaware, is it the different portions that different have maybe pH balances, or why does it taste different?
That's a really good question. The question is, if water is coming from all over, why is there different in taste? Well, the headwaters is where the Delaware River begins, and that's up in the mountains of New York. So that's probably the most pristine water because it's in the mountains and people aren't living there. And as you come down, so it's going to probably be a little bit more mineralized. There's a lot more rocks there, fewer farms, fewer suburban areas where people are living, fewer areas where there's industry, either taking water out and pumping it back in. So all of those things are affecting the water quality and the taste of it. Yeah, there are minerals and things in there that they're not taking out pollutants, but some water is heavier than others because of the metals and other minerals and yeah, that kind of stuff in it. So it's going to have a different mixture, a different flavor. And then there are many tributaries, the Schuylkill on this side, and the Lehigh and the lower Lehigh on this Pennsylvania side. On New Jersey, it's the Rancocas and the Cooper and the Newton and all of those coming in from our side. On the New Jersey side. So yeah, it's going to be slightly different. And because there are different minerals in it, the pH will be slightly different, but it's all fresh water. So, except for in the estuary, where the salt water meets the fresh water. So it will have, and there's different soils around as well, and that all contributes to the flavor.
That's a good question. Valid.
Oh, it's our favorite question.
Valid question.
The
You
poop
seem
question.
hesitant. Okay, ready? All right. So while a snake looks like it's all tail, there is a designated tail area, and it's where it starts from where it goes to the bathroom. So I'll come close. There's a spot down here. My finger is kind of on it right now. You're so cool. You don't want to see. It's right here, and there's just an opening, a slit in its scales. It's called a cloaca. It's similar to the way that the bird goes to the bathroom. It's kind of a all-purpose hole.
So it's really interesting if you think about vertebrate animals with backbones. They have sort of what we call a through gut, which they have an oral opening, and then they have the exit, right? And I didn't pay attention before, like the 2 or 3 times that I've seen this movie before, but I realized when the monster came and he threw up all those bones into the pit, it occurred to me that if it's puking up all those bones, chances are probably good that this animal doesn't have a through gut. So it's a blind gut, which things go in, they get digested, and they get puked back up, which is what a lot of animals without bones do, like an anemone or a coral. They have a blind gut. But there are some things, there's birds that will puke stuff up. Yeah. Owls.
Dissected an owl pellet when you were a kid?
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm not sick. I have allergies. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so the question was, it's an important ecosystem, but what animals are living in it? There are lots of fishes, all kinds of, I couldn't name them all, there are multiple species of fishes, and some of them are really actually very important to this region. There are fishes that are actually coming into the Bay Area, and they're reproducing and having their young in the Bay Area because it is protected. And so sharks pup in the bay. They don't have their babies out at sea. They come in into a protected area, have the baby sharks, and then they swim back out. And you have things like shad and sturgeon coming in. You have eel going out. Those are all really important to the ecosystem. And actually, quite a long time ago, not so much now, because there aren't a lot of sturgeon here. They used to be in this region the most important source of caviar in the world, and it was sought after more so than Russian caviar. So in terms of humans, that's important to us, but it is a very protected area. We do have a lot of variety, and there are a lot of birds that rely on the Delaware River.
We saw a bald eagle
was
right
just-
outside our office
Yeah,
this morning.
juvenile
I was
bald
waiting
eagle.
to interject. I was waiting.
Of course,
So
we're all geeks about it. So as soon as we spot the eagle, we all run out and we're staring at it. But there haven't been eagles in this area for a very long time. And right just north of the Ben Franklin Bridge, there is an eagle's nest or two on Petty's Island. So that's something new. So we know that there's a healthy environment, because if there's a predatory bird around, we know it's fishing in the Delaware, so that means there must be enough fish. On our side of the river, I don't know about here, on this side of the river, there's something called celery grass, and it's a protected habitat, and a lot of important, fishes are, nursery, mussels, other kinds of invertebrates and things are living in there. So that's pretty important. And then the horseshoe crab in the Delaware Bay is the most numerous here in our region. And they're extremely important because as birds migrate from South America up north, they stop here and they feed on the horseshoe crab eggs, and that's their fuel to get them to the rest of the leg of their trip. And if we didn't have that, they wouldn't make it. Anything else? Thank you so much for having us.
If you want to get a closer look at the animals and touch a snake pelt, if you're brave enough, come and take a look.